Most interesting experiment ever. Kids cracked up in the grocery store. Parents were appalled. And I really couldn't do it as long as I intended to. I only lasted for about 4 or 5 weeks. I intended to do it for 3 months, but I just couldn't. I'm pretty much rather on the conservative side, but as you can see, I do have a sense of humor. Okay, so, next. So this book will learn about the facts on flatulence, and the first chapter talks about the biological aspects of flatulence, how it acts and how we get it in our system. And the next chapter is on facts and feelings. And then it goes into how they relate. So holding in flatulence equals stuff in your emotions and being afraid to let them out. And the reasons why people are afraid is because they're afraid of the outcomes. What do you think some of the outcomes would be? Farting freely. And anytime I say the word farting, remember I'm talking about expressing your emotions. It's a metaphor for sharing your emotions.
I have a very important one. Like, when my chest hurts sometimes, like I'll chew some Tums, and either you're going to burp or you're going to pass gas. And actually it makes my chest feel better.
Yes, it does.
And another question, it does?
You probably have GERD. Yeah.
What is that?
GERD is when you have acid from your stomach that comes up through your colon. And sometimes people have a hiatus hernia, and it doesn't close. There's a flap that keeps the gastric juices from coming up. Okay. But when that flap is not working properly, it stays open all the time, and so you constantly have that problem. So you want to get something a little more
well, I'll go get some Sprite, like some clear liquid Sprite in my stomach.
Yeah, it is.
Upset. I'll go get
but the problem with that is, and as you can see, I studied a lot about health also, and so I can tell you that drinking soda is only going to aggravate the esophagus more. And so what's happening is that the acid is actually eroding or eating away like soda does acid on a battery. It's actually eating away the lining of your esophagus. And so you'll end up with something called Barrett's esophagus, which is, you can actually end up having to have your esophagus removed. So you want to make sure you go to a doctor and get something stronger, like Nexium?
Well, it works for me because it's not like it happens all the time, but when it does, and I'll grab something and make me burp really fast, and I'll drink a Sprite really quick, and I'll go, and I've heard so many different people, at least 3 people told me over my lifetime that they thought they had to pass gas, and they did something else and messed up their clothes.
Oh boy. Yeah, that's called a surprise fart.
And one more. Okay. And when you let out that real long one, does your stomach go down?
The air in your intestines, it depends on actually how much was in there. I would hope it wasn't that much, or else, like, the environment would change. Not only your stomach, it would have to be considerable. In other words, for your stomach to go down. Only you can really know the answer to that. So those are called surprise farts, and those are some things that I talk about in my book. I'm glad you brought those up because I actually talk about the colon, how to keep the colon clean, how to keep the body clean, how to, in other words, live an anti-flatulent life, and also to live an emotionally healthy life. We can go on to the next one. Did anyone else have a question? No, you said it.
I have one more. Why does egg make you smell so bad? Like if you eat an egg, and then you pass gas. What is that? Why does it smell like that?
I'll answer that question. And I think it's on page, let me see, 5 or 4. Some of the different foods that we eat, they create methane in our body.
Create what?
Methane, they create methane.
METHINE.
Yeah, you know, I probably will remember this the more book signings I do, but yeah. Okay, we get gas in our intestines from quite a few places. The air we swallow, gas seeping into our bowels from our blood, gas produced by bacteria living inside of our guts already, and gas that's formed via chemical reactions in our guts. The oxygen in most of the air we swallow gets absorbed by the body before it gets into the colon. The composition of fart gas is very erratic. By the time the air reaches our large intestines, most of what is left is nitrogen. The chemical reaction between our stomach acid and our intestinal fluids may produce carbon dioxide, which, by the way, is also a component of air and a product of bacterial actions. Bacteria also produce hydrogen and methane. Okay, how we produce gas depends on several factors. What we eat, how much air we swallow, what kind of bacteria we have in our guts, and how long we hold in the gases. Okay. So it depends on what type of foods you eat. Some people may have reactions to certain foods and some people won't. Like you might have a reaction when you eat eggs. Mine's peanut butter. You don't want to be around me if I eat peanut butter. So, and in the book it goes on to talk about how the different foods react in your body and how it turns into methane and how that eventually causes gas.
So you're saying eggs turn into methane?
Everything that becomes flatulence in your body is turning into methane. I'm not saying that eggs do or don't turn into methane. It depends on your body and how your body handles certain foods. A lot of us, we're eating a lot of foods that we don't need to be eating. We're eating a lot of different carbohydrates in this country. America has so much. I've been to Africa, I've been to Italy, I've been to Europe, and the food choices are so slim. Here, people come here and have a shock. They go into shock when they go into a regular grocery store because there's so much.
Yeah.
We're not supposed to eat it all. Okay, I've eliminated so many carbohydrates out of my diet. The only thing I really eat right now is rice, and every now and then I eat some plantain or fufu. And and so I eat a lot of the food in its natural state and keep those carbs out of our body to stay healthy. So I'm giving you I beg your pardon?
What kind of rice do you eat?
Rice? I eat white rice because I prefer it, but I also eat brown rice. I eat brown and white rice bread and pastas, a lot of Asian and different foods. And I also talk a lot about health in this book. So if you have any questions about things that you might be experiencing or something that somebody in your family might be experiencing, hives, which is becoming more predominant in our society because we're eating so many carbohydrates and foods that our bodies are not used to, or are not meant to have. If you have a certain blood type, you might want to stay away from certain foods. So I've experimented with it and it really works. Okay, so anyway, so we hold in flatulence. They equal stuff and emotions. We're afraid to let them out because we're afraid of the outcome. In the same aspect, we hold in our feelings. We're afraid to share how we honestly really feel, or something that really honestly happened with us, with the people that we need to share with the most, because we're afraid of eventually loss.
What about, how do you deal with collective flatulence? You were talking about one person being singled out in the car. Suppose maybe you're among 100 people and somebody did the bomb. And then everybody gets blamed. Nobody wants to say anything. People look at each other and then everybody becomes culprit and victims in that. Instead of the one being pointed out, how do you deal with something like that?
Well, there's some reality in being offended by it, but there's also another reality in choosing what you're personally going to do about it, and then the alternate reality is realizing that there's nothing you can do about it. Either you accept something or you try and change it. Those are your only two choices. So if you're in a situation where you can't remove the person, and hopefully if a person's in a large room and they have a whole lot of flatulence, and I want you to be thinking all the time when I'm talking about emotional issues too, because you might work with somebody who's a chronic,
yeah, I'm just
okay, right.
to get emotional.
Yeah, and so that is a very good question because in a work situation, for instance, I worked at a treatment center, and there was one counselor, oh boy, and I pride myself on having gotten along very well with almost everybody I meet in my life, but everyone really had a hard time with this person, and we all talked about it when she wasn't around, but the minute she showed up, everyone would be quiet, and she got away with so much stuff. Finally, one day, I couldn't handle it anymore, and I had an emotional explosion. And I just went off on her. And absolutely no one supported me. I was the scapegoat. Don't be the scapegoat. In that situation, if you become the scapegoat, be willing to stand up for the consequences of what happens after that. And see, what happens is, a lot of times people are holding in their flatulence, right? They're all in that same room, and then somebody farts, and then when somebody farts, everybody gets offended, whether or not they wanted to hear what the person said, or whether it was truth or not. They're still offended. We need to move into a place in our society where we can become honest with how we feel, because your emotions affect your health. And we'll talk about that shortly. The next slide, please. Okay, feelings are not facts. I heard this all my life. It was driving me crazy when I went to school to become a counselor. That's all I heard. Joyce Meyer, feelings are not facts. You know, but the Spirit kept, just really kept poking at me and saying, you know, that doesn't make any sense. My feelings have taught me so much. Okay, so let's just listen to this idea for a minute. Has anybody else ever heard this before? Feelings are not facts? That you should discount your feelings, that you shouldn't pay any attention to them all, because they're just trying to drive you crazy, they're trying to leave you into sin, they're trying to get you to do the wrong things. Okay, but in reality, our feelings are our internal guides. They are pointing to what needs to be focused on, what needs to be attended to, and what needs to be healed or changed in us. And when we learn to utilize them in that way, when we learn to view them in that way, your feelings will become your best friend.